Hello, and welcome to the Library Lounge, where we're going to discuss writing perspectives meant to inspire you as you work on your manuscripts. Tonight, I'll be speaking with Ami Blackford and Chester Forrester about what it takes to heat up the page in and out of the bedroom. Grab a delicious beverage and join us for Books and Brandy in Episode 3, Character Chemistry. Happy Valentine's Day, Ami. Thank you so much for the gifts. I love the roses, and the teddy bear with my name stitched in was particularly delightful to get. Tonight we're going to be discussing chemistry between characters. How important is this to include in a manuscript, and does this discussion apply to those that do not write romance? Thank you so much, Sola. Happy Valentine's Day to you. As you know, this is my first one flying solo in a long time, and I know you are too, as well as Chester, so we're going to have a good time with that. And you're welcome for the presents. I was really happy to get those for you. You know, I think chemistry on page is the number one reason that books are either bestsellers or they flop. Because no matter how intricate of a world you build, and no matter how exciting and engaging a plot might be with twists and turns and all of that, if you aren't invested in the characters, then you don't care about the story. You don't care about all that other stuff going on. And so the characters are what sell the story. So first of all, your characters have to have dimension, right? Once you kind of flesh those out, and we're going to talk about that more. But this was a really great topic for Valentine's. But beyond just having characters that have dimension, now you've got these really fleshed out characters, but if they're not interacting on that stage, that backdrop that you've created in a way that evokes an emotional response from the reader, that's what you have to do. And it is not easy. It is not easy to, whether it's platonic or romantic, to get those characters to engage in a way that feels natural and to get that emotional response from the reader, like when they're having an argument. Who cares if you don't care? Like if you don't get the reader to invest emotionally prior to that big blowout, then they don't really care about the argument. So it's really important. And this is, you know, I'm just sitting here talking about it, and I'm sure writers out there that don't really write romance understand heating up the page is not just about sex scenes. It's not just about intimacy being created or romance, you know, the fights that normally happen within a romance plot, within the romance genre. This is for platonic friendships. This is for any relationship connection within the book. It needs to be believable, and it needs to evoke that emotional response. Wonderful. So that brings me to my notes. I found your 4 essentials for chemistry outside and inside the bedroom really enlightening. Since you know I dabble in erotica and romantasy, what are the 4 principles that should be considered for out of the bedroom chemistry? Okay, so let me grab my notebook here. The first one is tension. So the four essentials for chemistry out of the bed. Number 1 is tension. Whether it's internal or external, you have to make this something that is happening throughout the course of the story. And you know, like in dialogue, you don't write it just like it sounds in real life. It would be super boring. It's the same thing with tension. Some of it is going to feel almost unrealistic, but there are these key moments in every scene that you should be upping the ante on. It needs to be either internal or external. One of those needs to be happening in that scene for it to be relevant within the plot. And then also there are key moments where you're going to have both. The second one is it's contrast. Your characters, in order to have that chemistry, that back and forth, the characters definitely need to have some sort of contrasting life philosophies, interests, and backgrounds. And you want to have that juxtaposition make it make sense. So this is sometimes where you'll see a cop paired up with a robber, and there's this chemistry that goes between them, especially in romance novels. You have almost this opposite thing happening because it creates instant tension and conflict within the story. It's already baked in basically to who they are. Number 3 is conflict. They need to be learning to overcome something together. And that creates this kind of, you know, we're in this together. Even if in the beginning of the book, a lot of times you'll see they're very resistant to work together. They're not working together well. And by the end, in their character arcs individually and then as a team, they are now working really well together. You'll see this mimicked through almost every movie that you watch, especially like the Fast and Furious and those types of movies. Action movies are really good about really showing this arc beautifully. And it's always usually this dynamic duo or a small group of people, if it's a little bit more complicated. Growth. They're getting closer via the conflict they're overcoming together and changing. Most of the time we want to see them changing for the better, but it depends on the type of story you're writing. If you have anti-heroes or you're focused on your antagonists, a lot of time they're going to be devolving together, like in Joker and Harley Quinn. You see this character going from this specific thing and he starts to devolve, she starts to devolve, but they're in love. And so it's really engaging to watch how these characters, their trauma, their damage basically gets fueled within their love story. So it creates the same dynamic. It's just not one maybe that you want to come across in a dark alley. Oh, this is really fascinating. I'm going to keep all of these notes. Thank you. And what about in the bedroom? Okay, number one on my personal list is timing. Chemistry out of bed needs to be established before they get into bed together, because nobody really is going to care about the sex they're having if they aren't invested in this emotional play that's happening between the characters. So usually a really well-placed sex scene somewhere in the beginning act, but it needs to be more near the end. So you have some time to build scenes to where now these characters are really hot for each other. They're in the middle of a conflict together and, they happen to be in a locked closet together or something. It's one of those where give the reader a chance to acclimate, to learn who the characters are, learn where they're coming from, what their perspective is, and learn the dynamic. They need to learn the dynamic between these two characters before, even in good erotica. The really good erotica establishes these connections, especially with women, which is the majority of who reads erotica, which is the majority of who reads, period. We are psychologically focused when it comes to sex. The act of sex is not enough for us. And so really good erotica understands that and builds that tension before clothes start coming off, is basically how I see it. The second one is, nothing breaks the mood more than having these really unrealistically timed sex scenes. So, in a high stakes conflict, perhaps, let's just dive into a book, in a movie too, and suddenly the characters are making out for the first time and there's bombs going off behind them, unless it's, Harley Quinn, and that's part of the movie. It doesn't work and it just blows the whole fucking thing. So the timing is really important, and space those sex scenes out. I like to think of the sex scenes as action, but it's more of a falling action. It's more of a background action that can come. You do not want to combine it with a high stakes, high conflict action scene. It just doesn't work. It's a great place where the story is dipping, where there's not a lot of external conflict. You can place this in there to heat things up, and the readers normally really enjoy it there. Number two is descriptions. Less is more, in my opinion. Again, with erotica, a little bit of physical description, but you need to allow the reader to fill that in with their imagination. Just like with character descriptions, if you describe too intricately, you leave no imagination. It might not match the reader's perspective, and it blows it for them. It pulls them right out of the story. Like, ooh, I don't like that position, or, that's not how I would do things. The same thing with a character. If you over describe it, they can no longer overlay themselves on that character and feel like maybe they are experiencing the book through their eyes. So I feel like less is more. And just keep the descriptions as you want them to be, to evoke a response. So just less is more there. And number three, include all five senses. Sound and taste is usually the two things I find missing in a lot of scenes, especially when I write. I have to actually go back like a layer, like a track in a computer program. That's how I write my novels, is in layers. And sound and taste are ones they don't make it into what I call like the scripting phase, which is the rough draft. And it's mostly dialogue and just basic actions that are going with the dialogue. And it's reads like a movie script almost. And so sound and taste, and the reason why they're so important, excuse me, is because they evoke that emotional response. When you look at something, whether it's a beautiful painting, a photograph, most of the time, if that was coupled with sound, a song was on in the background, and a taste, like there's apple pie baking, those things now become associated with it, and it triggers an emotional response. But it's like your baby. When you have a baby, if you look at the photo later in life, you'll remember almost that baby smell. But it's the smell that evokes the emotional response, not the actual looking at the baby. It's like the combination of both is what creates that feeling, that warm glow in your heart. So the fourth one is dialogue. Instead of repeating back the action the characters are taking, it's like, we understand what they're doing. You've kind of already described that. So now them verbalizing it adds absolutely nothing to the scene. It's redundant. It's mundane. To me, it's like illustration, unless it's like picture books where it's, Johnny walked up the hill and you have a picture of Johnny walking up the hill. As kids get older, and this is why graphic novels are so fucking popular, because you're combining something that you have to look at and go, what's happening here? It's not maybe perfectly, because it gets redundant. It gets a little bit mundane. You're not giving the reader enough credit, basically. And so dialogue, this is a great time to have the characters resolving whatever happened, that now this is the effect. They are having sex, so per se a fight, which is a big one. They are now using their bodies and language to discuss that fight. So they're talking about it as they're taking their clothes off, type of a thing. This really, when I was a teenager, I used to read all of those Viking, heavy romance. Just, I love these books. I have boxes of these books before I got into Danielle Steele. These were the types of stories with Fabio on the cover, hair blowing in the wind type of a thing. And this was an era where it almost felt like erotica. It's like a combination of both. And I don't read these types of stories anymore. I'm sure this is the way it's still done, but maybe not. I don't know. But the characters would be having these types of discussions, and that's what would really heat it up for me and turn me on. So I feel like that's a really important one. I really love this advice. I work very hard at the dialogue because I've noticed the same thing when I read erotica or romantasy. If the dialogue is resolving something, it really does something more for me, as in, like you were saying, in turning me on. What are some tips on pre-planning chemistry between characters in the early developmental stages? I think in the early developmental stages, it is making sure you're lining up these conflicts, like I was talking about the cop and the robber. So right off the bat, one of the first things that usually a writer will do is figure out, okay, what does this main character, my protagonist, do? So are they an artist? Are they a cop? And you assign that first, sometimes even before the way that they look. So that's like one of the most baseline things that you're going to decide. Make sure that there's enough contrast that it's going to cause conflict and tension, but not so much that they're going to be just complete enemies. Okay. So, a cop and a robber, the robber needs to have some sort of background that makes them, maybe they're an ex-cop, that just their family, that, their wife got murdered and they turned to, basically it just blew their entire fucking life philosophy. And so through the course of the action, through the course of the plot, the arc is going to be them coming back to now wanting to help people. So you have to make it, there needs to be that tension and conflict, but it needs to be sensible. It needs to have that arc in there. And so first you're going to try and set it up so they do have some sort of an opposing, think of like a chess game. You've got the black and white, but you need to make it to where these two characters are going to be able to come together and really learn from each other. So I think that's the most important part, is really figuring out who your characters are and how are they going to change throughout the course of the story, and making sure that counterpart that you're pairing them with, or, if it's in a group, gets more complicated that way. But if you're going to pair it that way, just make sure you're thinking those dynamics through a little bit and then just jot it down. It's really fun too, because it's going to help you design the plot around that. So you're going to have a plot that matches these conflicts that you want. and things aren't just willy-nilly, and now you're going in there and trying to edit this stuff in and cause heat where now you just can't. It's like there's these two lifeless characters. It's feeling very one-dimensional and flat, and you can't figure it out. So if you can just put in a little pre-planning, it's most essential with your two main protagonists. That's usually how it goes. You know, whether it's a best friend and this main character, or it's a romantic interest, or a mixture of both. However that goes. And then even with the antagonist, if you can take that extra measure and make sure that your villain as well has points of that these two characters could actually learn from each other, it's even better. Making that villain just as dimensional as your protagonist really takes things up like 10,000 notches. Don't write one-dimensional villains. It flattens the entire book. So no matter how well-rounded all the other characters are, it just kind of blows it. And this is something that really gets overlooked. And what makes a book shine is when your antagonist, your villain, is as dimensional as your protagonist and, you know, the hero of your story. I am really going to take your advice on this and make sure that I put a little bit more into my pre-planning to make this a little bit more fun when I'm moving these characters around. What are key turnoffs for you when it comes to sex scenes? How can writers avoid these? Okay, so top of my list is definitely gratuitous sex. I don't like it. If it doesn't have meaning within the context of the story, it's like, ooh, I could have done without that. And I am a very sensual person. And so it needs to be moving the plot forward. Nothing is a bigger turnoff to me. I'm like, I don't want to read this right now. Like, I will literally skip that in a book if it's happening at an unrealistic time and over description. It's like, we get it I wrote a YA novel, and I just wanted to try weaving in some sex scenes later in the series. There's 4 of the books. And in the beginning of the series, I did this with kissing, where I was just over describing it, and they were doing it all the time. So she was always nibbling on his ear and, you know, kissing his neck. And my friend Callie is the one who was reading. She's like, my only bit of criticism is this. I was overdoing it. It was just nauseating is the way she put it. And she was totally right. When I went back in and I started looking at it, I was like, oh my God, this is so overkill. Because it takes away from when it really works. It just really hits you, you know, and you're like, ooh, that is sensual, that's sexy. And so taking out the over description, I actually prefer, and I found this out when I wrote this series. And by the way, in my YA, I will not be writing sex. This was something I knew I was going to most likely be taking out. I just wanted to see, how do you do this appropriately, basically? And it was all very poetic, most of it. And that's the other thing I want to add here is varying your language is really important. So another key turnoff is when it's all the same descriptions. You'll see this with a lot of authors. They literally keep describing the same positions. They switch it up in the order in which these things are happening, but it's kind of the same exact thing. And it gets redundant. It gets really boring and monotonous. So I think those are my key turnoffs, is just over description, monotonous description, and just the timing being completely off on a sex scene. And it's just there so that clothes are coming off. And maybe the author was in an ornery mood that day or something. You know, they were feeling frisky, basically. And, you know, it shows in the book type of a thing. So I recommend that, you know, writers go back over their manuscripts and look at that part. I really enjoy you saying that, because my manuscripts are just filled with gratuitous sex. I need to monitor that a bit. So thank you for the reminder. What are key turn-ons? Turn-ons. There we go. I'm sorry. I think I'm a little embarrassed right now. How can writers amplify sensuality in a way that evokes an emotional response from the reader? Number 1 for me is when it is evoking that deep emotional response because the characters were almost going to die, and now they've resolved it and they are celebrating, basically, or they're so relieved that they're still alive, or it's right before, you know, they're going to maybe be killed. So there's a conflict that is happening, that they are coming together as a means of supporting each other beyond just the act of sex and sex for pleasure. There's a reason behind it that is deeply connecting for them. That is the number 1 turn on for me. And if you can incorporate that into the book, it takes the sex scene to the next level, because just like in real life, when you're just having this kind of flat, almost robotic sex, it's not memorable. You know, you don't remember those moments in your own life. If you can make the sex scene memorable, it was really meant to be in the manuscript, and you can feel very proud of it because you're teaching the reader something. You're teaching them something. And so I feel like that is the number one thing for me, the turn on, and really poetic or just really interesting ways of describing sex that make me look at it in a different way, in a lyrical way, in a just a more powerful way. So if you can find ways to describe what they're feeling and what is happening in ways that you've never seen described before, and really challenge yourself, if you can make that more poetic way or interesting way match the conflict that's either been resolved or they're going to be resolving, even better. So if you're using metaphors and that type of thing, using that type of imagery, sound, and taste to match the conflict, you're going to evoke a very powerful emotional response from your reader. Beautifully said. How do you feel about gratuitous and descriptive sex being included in the YA market? I am not a fan of this thing going on. I understand that we all get wrapped up in the sensuality and the heat of the moment. But what we have to understand is that teens are being inundated with sex all the time. And it's a problem. It's a real problem if you are basically, there's this crossover with new adult. And if you make the character 18, hey, they're an adult now. And it's gotten creepy. And I think it's a really big turnoff for teenagers. And I understand why, that their mom, is basically writing these books, their mom's age or older, and they are writing from the perspective of their age. And then they are writing these extremely descriptive sex scenes. And so it's just this fad that it needs to stop, is how I feel. And I'm definitely not going to pretend like it doesn't bother me. Then the other number one reason it bothers me is that I think teens are really hungry for novels that are not just about sex. There's almost like this nauseating, we need fucking sex situation happening already in our society. And they're being inundated with it, like I said. And so books are meant to be an escape for them. YA is really coming of age. It's about them finding themselves, about finding their inner power. And so, my suggestion to YA authors, because they love romance, write clean romance, write a romance that, the farthest they get is kissing. And if you are going to include sex, make it off page. It's alluded to. Definitely write it poetically if you're going to include it. Do not write as if you are a grown woman writing a descriptive sex scene for another grown woman to read, because it's kind of taken over. I love YA and I'm a grown woman, but it can get embarrassing almost when you come across these books that are clearly geared towards, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. And these descriptions are just, they're not full-grown women. They're still kids, basically. And I feel like it's just, and then the story is not realistic. And what are they being taught? They're being taught to basically use their bodies, and that this is like the centerpiece of the story of their life. So YA is really, to me, about these kids going on these adventures, whether it's internal, external, or both, and finding themselves and finding their place in the world. And it's kind of a little bit even of an awkward age. And so I feel like more authors need to be writing clean romance to teach, what does it mean to actually fall in love? It's the emotion. It's how is this man treating you, this teen man, and because that's what he's becoming. Is he being kind to you? Is he protecting you? Or is it this bad boy that suddenly turns into Superman? And then there's that confusing image that's being put out of this, there's always the love triangle, and there's this bad boy, and he's this hero. And it just sets girls up to be in these abusive relationships, if you ask me. Because they read these stories, that's where they're going to learn. And so just treat it that way. Make the story more about the romance needs to serve a function. They are working as a team through a conflict together. They're changing and evolving for the better. I prefer that, especially with this age group. And the romance part should be accentuating that. It's bringing them closer. They're bonding through it. It's just if you're going to write for this age group, I feel like that really needs to be taken very seriously. So that's my thoughts on that. Very good. I couldn't agree more. And I am very careful when I buy books for my niece to make sure that it is not basically disguised as a book for adult women. How does a writer determine the chemistry is just right in their manuscript before moving on to edit other layers such as world building and the plot? So this is going to vary, writer to writer, but I feel like the number one way to know when you can move on from the editorial part and it's hitting just right is that emotional response. If you have written this scene and when you come across it because you're rereading it and it evokes an emotional response, you're good. Just leave it there and move on. So that's the number one thing with really every layer is, even with the world building, is it evoking, you're feeling like, wow, I've really entered a space here that I'm buying that I can feel. And so it's the same thing with the chemistry between your characters, because they come to life for the reader at this point. And they are the centerpiece. Your characters are the centerpiece, and everything that is happening is really background, even your plot. If you can make people fall in love with your characters and the chemistry between them, you could have a bestseller on your hand. This has been a very enlightening conversation for me. So now we're going to hear from Chester Forrester, who's been busy baking cupcakes for us. I cannot wait to try one with my Brandy. And he is going to be discussing with you his newest manuscript. He's writing a romantasy, and we're going to let him announce the title to you. I'm really looking forward to listening to this conversation, and I will see you all on the other side of this. Chester, it is so good to see you. The cupcakes are smelling delicious. Happy Valentine's Day, and thank you for baking those for us. Tell me about your newest manuscript.
Amy, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. My newest manuscript, and you're welcome for the cupcakes. They're actually my ex-girlfriend's recipe. She is not happy with me right now, but I'm here to have fun, so we're not going to focus on it. We're not going to focus on it at all. I'm going to move on with this conversation now. Viking Conquest is the name of this romantasy. I'm very excited. It's just really nice to switch genres. To be honest with you, the thriller genre, it's dead for me. I know I've already told you that, but it is well worth saying again. I never hit number one. It has been 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe 6. I don't know. It is only number 2 still, and it's because of that book cover. My ex-girlfriend is the one who introduced me to this hack of a designer. Excuse me. A hack of a designer, and maybe they're gonna run off together. I don't really know. She had a problem with me making love to my typewriter, but I'm in good spirits. I'm going to switch gears here. I told my therapist I'm really gonna try. I'm really going to try to not focus on the negative. I'm going to be upbeat and positive.
Yeah, breakups are not fun. I've been in one now for, it's almost going on a year, and we're trying to work it out, but it can stick you right in the heart, especially on a day like today. But we're here together. So, okay, Viking Conquest, I'm assuming it's a romance novel that is including Vikings. Can you give us a little bit, you're calling it a romantasy, so I need to know what is happening in the fantasy aspect of the book.
Oh, it is delightful. They are fairies, or the fae, as the ladies like to say. They are Viking fairies, and they are traveling the globe in their ship, and it's all staged on this ship, so it's very, very pirate-esque, Viking-esque. That's what's happening. So the fairies are there. I'm sure there will be more fantasy as I move along. Right now, I'm just focused on the two main characters, the very chesty blonde and the very muscular, long-haired, pirate-esque, Viking-esque, they're the same to me, with pointy ears. So that is what they are doing with, that is what I'm doing. So I'm a little upset right now. I am looking at those cupcakes over there, and I'm thinking about my girlfriend and how sad she looked to be breaking up with me, because I am a gem of a partner, and I cannot believe that she decided to leave me because, well, I quit making love like I used to. I'm not going to lie about it. I think it might be the magic brandy.
Yeah, that brandy, it can definitely get you. So maybe take it down a notch. But right now it sounds like you're more invested in writing the romance than actually experiencing it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. It's okay. There's tissue right there. I know it is. It's difficult. How do you approach chemistry between characters?
How do I approach it? They really need to hate each other. It's the old, enemies to lovers situation. I really love when the characters, they just hate one another in the beginning, and then by the end, they are just making love. They just work it out between the sheets, as they say. Yes, it's kind of like me and my ex-girlfriend, we started out, we did not like one another at all, but I won her over with my dazzling personality and, of course, my talent. I think it was really my talent. Maybe the personality has a little bit of work that needs to be done, but boy, can I write. So anyway, I think they just really, the best thing is just make sure that they do not like one another at all. Like in my book, we have the Viking fairy who has abducted. I know, isn't that sexy? I love that when that happens. He has abducted this princess from the fairy realm, and she hates him. She hates the way he looks. She hates the way he sounds. He's very sexy. I've written him he has big muscles and shiny hair and big hands, but she's repulsed by him. It's really gonna turn people on.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that was an interesting response. You might just want to check out my notes. Sola will have them, right, Sola? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm not saying that isn't an approach. It is an approach, but you might just want to review what I had to kind of flesh it out a little bit. What are some tips for evoking an emotional response from readers?
I don't do notes, Amy, but thank you for the offer. I greatly appreciate it. I know that I'm new to the Romantasy genre, but I think I've got this. I only have one tip. Make them fight a lot. This really evokes the adrenaline response, It's just really important that they're constantly fighting with one another. And then it makes the lovemaking scenes, by contrast, just really engaging. You don't know if they're going to be fighting like not to be cliche or anything, but cats and dogs. My girlfriend has this cat that she's left, and I know this is going to sound a little strange, but I really do think about her when it is curled up in my lap, because she kind of used to like to rest her head in my lap when we would watch some television. So I'm a little sad about the cat, but I also love the cat, and I don't really know what to do with him. But anyway, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but it's very odd, we are going through a breakup, especially on a day like today. I hope she knows that I love her and that she's listening to this, and if she changes her mind, I may put the typewriter down for a bit. Maybe this will be the only Romantasy book I ever write. I don't know. It is my proclamation of love on this day. The emotional response is just have them fight, just like we're doing. Right, schmooksy poo? We fight, we make up, we make love. That is how it goes.
Oh, okay, Chester. I think maybe she will be listening to this. You all were together for quite some time. So, on that note, I think you already answered this. Do you plan on continuing to write Romantasy? And will Viking Conquest be a series?
Amy, thank you so much. I do appreciate your compassion. It's been evoking a lot of emotions from me to keep this on track, this conversation. Because I really do like to be very precise in my answers to you. I'm going to see what she says about writing more Romantasy. I'm not quite sure right now. If she wants to come back to our treehouse, our little nook in the woods, I will probably forego writing any more in this genre. But if she comes back, I will model every female protagonist from there after her. I swear it. So then Viking Conquest will be a series. I will love to continue this storyline forward. I've already fallen in love with my main character and his enslaved fairy queen. And yes, we're going to carry it forward because they are going to be a delightful couple by the end. You'll see, honey. Maybe I will model her after you. If you call into the show, Sola's by the phone. We're getting ready to have cupcakes, okay? Make it a happy Valentine's Day for Chester. I love you.
This concludes tonight's episode with Chester Forrester. We hope that aspiring and professional writers enjoyed our conversation. You can find information about Amy on Facebook and Instagram. Please find those in the description box beneath this video.